Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Cleef, and I'm thrilled you're here. And I know you're going to get a ton of value from the young man we're interviewing today. His name is Josh Sterling, and he's got about a $15 million portfolio. He's based just south of Detroit, which I know has been a real target-rich environment for a while. I think it's tightening up now, but he started out in single families, moved into multifamily, and I know he's going to add a ton of value to us today. Josh, welcome, brother.
Thanks for having me, Rod. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So let's start with your story. You know, that's a great place to start. Did you always start in real estate or talk about how you got into it?
Sure. I started with a path I think a lot of people head down. Grew up out in California, wanted to get as far away from home as possible, went to college in Daytona Beach, Florida to be an airline pilot, and progressed pretty much as planned through school and into that career field. Took me about 5 years in that field to realize that a couple things. I didn't really like the travel as much as I thought I would, and there was no stability there. So I was.
So you were flying commercially?
I was, yeah, for about 5.5 years.
Wow. So I know now you've got a family. You just told me you've got a baby on the way. You got an 18-month-old. That's commitment.
Yes, it's something new. They don't come with an instruction book.
No, they don't. So you got out of being a pilot and tell us what happened.
Yeah, so it had become really my identity. I'd gone to school for that. I'd done everything I thought I was supposed to do, and I found myself just at the mercy of an employer. The airline industry at the time, this is 08, 09 timeframe, was struggling from the recession, and I found myself really not making any money with not any job stability on the horizon. And I didn't really have any other marketable skills. I had a degree in aeronautical science, and there's not a lot of things you can do with that. At the time, real estate seemed to make sense to me. It seemed you rent a house out for $1,000 a month, you get a check in the mail for $1,000, and I didn't understand all the expenses and problems with that or difficulties you could have there, but it made sense, and so I ventured into single family investing in '09. Which, looking
Perfect
back, was
time.
probably a pretty good time for it.
Perfect time. I was hiding under a rock. Yeah, good for you. So where was this? This was south of Detroit, same area that you're in now?
So I did have the benefit with the airlines. I'd been flying all over North America, really, but certainly all over the U.S. I'd seen a lot of different markets, and I had bought a home for myself back in the peak of the market, which I still have. It's still upside down to this day down in Florida. But I had seen that the Midwest market, and specifically, we're not in Detroit itself as the city, but we're not far from it. We're basically one of the southern suburbs. And I had seen that the cash flow markets up here were the price to rent ratio is just really
fantastic.
Interested me.
Okay. So you bought houses. When did you buy your first multifamily? Why'd you make that transition?
So we started buying houses in '09, and it took me until about 2012. I'd probably built up a portfolio of 20 or 25, somewhere in that range, single families. And we started looking into multi just to build scale. Something, it makes a lot of sense. It's much easier to buy 25 units at once than it is to buy 25 single families. And we came across a building that was a 24 unit in really, really bad shape. What you'd certainly call a value add play. In fact, it was 42% occupancy, and
wow.
They were about to lose it for taxes and everything. It was in bad shape.
What kind of an area?
I'd call it a C+ area. It's a market actually we still invest in today. Maybe even merging into the B- type area. You've got some for single family values in that area. To give you an idea, our average in this market is about $150,000 house, and right now in that area there's some $250,000 and $300,000 houses within a half mile of the building. So it's potential to become a stronger area, but somewhat rural as well.
Okay. So why was it 42% occupied?
That's something I wasn't sure of at the time either. My question was, is it bad management on the seller's part, or is there something wrong with this building in this location? Maybe there's not a strong rental market here because it is maybe a little rural, or there's, a little bit nicer houses here and it's more of a family type demographic. I wasn't sure. It
Hmm.
turns out that it was just bad management.
Okay.
We got into it and we were able to increase that occupancy. It took 14 months. We refied out of the land contract purchase and we were at 100% occupancy.
Aha, you did a land contract. Awesome. Brought your
We,
single family experience to the multifamily. That's awesome.
we really had to. I don't think there was a bank that, at least that I knew of, that would have financed that at 42% occupancy with
Yeah.
that much deferred maintenance. So
Probably not. Probably not. Okay. Well, good for you. Good for you. So you refinanced it out. You got the occupancy up. You just went to a local regional bank.
right. So with our one thing that we've been doing that may be unique, it was certainly unique at the time, is with our single family strategy, we've been doing what I call commercial blanket loans, where we package anywhere from, you're probably familiar, but we package
Oh,
anywhere from 4 to 15 at a time, and we pull cash out in these blanket loans. They have to be with a portfolio lender that holds that
mhm.
loan on their books, but
Banker.
um,
Portfolio
exactly.
bank, right? Yeah,
And
I did a bunch of that, and in fact, that was part of the reason for my demise back in 2008. I will forewarn you, okay? Because what I did was I cross collateralized my apartment buildings with my houses, and that's what pulled
mm,
the whole mess down in 2008.
oh,
So just be cognizant of that.
right.
Like for those of you listening. Those loans sound great. You're able to pull money out. You go with a portfolio lender, but when you package deals like that, if it's the old rotten apple theory, if part of it goes down, the whole thing goes down. So that's, and of course, 2008 was, I don't want to scare anybody. 2008 was hopefully an anomaly. Obviously we're heading into something else here before too long, but 2008 was definitely ground zero for real estate. So you did that 24 unit, you stabilized it. What was next on the multifamily side?
It took another year or so, year and a half, and we found a 53 unit deal.
Wow.
That was, now we're getting into early 2015.
Mm.
That deal I thought would be much more enjoyable. It was running at mid 90%, low 90% occupancies. It did have a bunch of deferred maintenance, but I was looking forward to it because I felt that I wouldn't have the large value add struggle.
Right.
Ended up being quite a bit harder to do that deal because, as you probably are well aware, occupancy had to come down in order to
Occupancy
improve the
comes
tenant
down
base.
when you're doing renovations. Yeah, I just talked about that at my live event this last weekend. People don't realize that, hey, you might be running a great occupancy rate, but if you plan to renovate units, they're going to be empty while you're renovating them, and you've got to account for that. So you got a little seminar on that notion then.
Yeah, I got the seminar without the education ahead of time there, and we also had to do quite a bit of improvement to the tenant base. So
Mhm. So
there was
that requires vacancy as well.
absolutely there was some economic vacancy there.
Right. You got to get them out to get them back in. Right. And economic vacancy, guys, is you can have a full up apartment building, but if only 70% of the people are paying, you've only got 70% economic occupancy, which is the only occupancy that matters. Okay. So you went through a little seminar, turning it over, repositioning it. Were you able to get it stabilized? And, it was just harder and more expensive than you thought. Was that it?
It was that I didn't expect it to cost as much as it did because of the repositioning.
Mm.
But yes, we were able to numbers on that one. If you want to talk about them, we bought in at 1.65 million. We put about 300,000 into it, which is a little more than planned. But quite a bit of
Sure.
deferred
It's
maintenance.
probably worth double that now. So
Yeah, we did just have we've been going to agency financing on a lot of these deals lately. So in the past 6 months, we refied it out at 2.8 million.
nice. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, guys, agency financing is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac financing, and it's typically non-recourse. It's great debt if you're going to hold on to a property long term, and it's pretty much the belle of the ball for multifamily and real estate if your loan amount's over $1 million. So that's fantastic. So I know that you told me you're 34 years old. If you were to go back and give your 20-year-old self some advice, what would you tell them? So, because I've got lots of listeners that are in their early 20s, they're motivated, they want this. What would you tell yourself, and by virtue of that, tell them?
Okay, well, first when I started out, either there wasn't the resources available for education that there are today, or I didn't find them. But either way, right off the bat, I would get educated in real estate. If this is the way you want to go, you've got to get educated before you start, whether that's courses or just
No
blogs or
question. No question.
forums.
Love
Find a
it.
mentor, get educated, and go from there. I personally wouldn't have gone the college route because now looking back, I don't do anything. I do still fly myself, but I don't do anything I went to college for. So I invested quite a bit in that. That didn't seem to return much for me. Um, but
Yeah,
again,
it's
as far
sad.
as
It's
what's that?
sad, but it's sad, but it's a reality in most cases. I asked the question at my event. I said, how many of you went to college? Raise their hand. Okay, how many of you uh, learned how to got all the resources and to learn how to financially bring yourself to the level of success that you want to get to, and all the emotional and psychological strategies you need to get there? And of course, nobody raised their hand. But
Right.
okay, you would get the training, no question. By the way, let me throw in a plug. I'm going to be in Chicago August 24th, 25th, and 26th. And Josh, you're welcome to come as well, my friend, on me.
Great.
But yeah, I'll be near O'Hare Airport, and would love to see you guys go. We just had our sold out LA event. It was an absolute success. In fact, if you're not on the big multifamily Facebook group, go there and see what people said about the event. I think you'll be very impressed. I got a tremendous amount of great feedback. And if you're not on that big Facebook group, go to multifamilycommunity.com and be sure you sign up. And we just exceeded 13,000 people there. We've only had it around for, I think, 6 or 7 months. So it's killing it. But anyway, so back to you, Josh. You say get the training. Absolutely. Dabblers get crushed. You must learn this business. And you can massively accelerate your learning curve if you haven't read my free book, that's kind of a no-brainer. Just text the word crush to 41411. We'll get you a free copy. It's like a textbook for this business. But learn, whether it's with me or somebody else, learn this business because, that's how you get further faster. And that's how you don't make any mistakes. So anyway, what else would you tell your 20-year-old self, buddy?
So once you've got an education base there, which took me a long time to get because I didn't go through any type of seeking that. I learned it all through making mistakes.
Yeah, me
Then
too.
I would get out there and I think that's going to give you the confidence to actually take some type of action, make moves. I look back at some of the deals I passed on and I know that I passed on them because I was scared or I didn't have the knowledge to do it. And that'd be the second piece of advice I think is be educated so that you're able to strike when you see an opportunity.
Competence builds confidence. You have to learn this business, and that's the only way to learn it. And repetition is the mother of skill. You have to study it over and over again. I had Grant Cardone on the show, and he said he studied the business for 4 years before he took action. But if you get a mentor, there you go, Grant Cardone's book. He just flashed it up. For those of you that are just listening to this, Josh just flashed up Be Obsessed or Be Average, one of Grant's books. And I've got some of Grant's Cardonisms on my wall. Comfort Kills, I Am Success. Grant's a funny guy. I laugh my ass off every time I talk to him, but he's a hitter and probably one of the best sales trainers in the world. But anyway, you've got to build your competence, which by virtue will equate to your confidence, and then you'll have the ability to influence people and bring investors into your deals and feel competent enough and congruent enough to convince brokers to take you seriously, sellers to take you seriously. But you've got to study, you've got to evaluate deals, you've got to be out there making relationships, and that's how you own this business. And so great advice, buddy. Thank you for that.
Yep.
So I know that you manage your own stuff, which, a lot of people don't do. And in fact, I don't even suggest for people, especially when they're in acquisition mode. I've managed my own stuff for 4 decades, but it's a lot of work. And now I know you've got an infrastructure, Josh, but let's dig into your property management, because I'm sure we can have some fun talking about some war stories and some of the things you've learned and maybe some suggestions you can make. So let's start with suggestions. At what point did you decide to start managing your own properties and why?
We started doing it we started right out of the gate doing it ourselves.
You did.
Back to one single family house.
So you've never had anybody manage your stuff. It's always been you.
It's always been me. And I got into an official property management company as a separate entity out of necessity, because I think what's very common is, especially starting with single and smaller multi, someone who's self-managing works themselves into a corner. You end up with 35, 40 units, somewhere in that range. It's certainly not more than about 50, and you can't control that on your own anymore. Now you've just created a job.
Yep.
And we did exactly that. I worked myself right into a corner where it was borderline miserable. And it happened with a big acquisition of that first 24 unit I was talking about. And now we were running somewhere around 50 units. I had a full-time job, and it was a realization that
you had a full-time job in addition to that?
Yes.
Oh, good God.
Okay, it was kind of stupid.
Because that in itself is a full-time job.
It was.
Wow. Okay.
But that was what gave growth and birth to the property management company. And I had to learn systems and how to implement them and create them and hire people. And we started growing that from one part-time assistant to today we're at 13 employees. And it's gotten much easier the day-to-day as we've grown, but it is a ton of work. Has its ups and its downs.
Oh, and I was telling you before we started recording, I mean, in the property management business, especially third-party property management, you don't hear from people to tell you how wonderful they think you are. They don't get phone calls to tell you how great you are. Tenants call when they want something, they're not happy. Owners call when they want something and they're not happy. And it's all good. And I did the same thing you did for a very long time, out of necessity as well. The only thing and as you said, it's a business. I mean, it's a completely separate business with its own systems, its documentation, its rules, its regs, its pitfalls. And, every business is nothing but people and systems. And that is a business that requires lots of systems. So, it sounds to me like you've got it well in hand. But I will tell you guys, those of you listening, as you start buying multifamily, I'm going to highly recommend that you get third-party management initially. Once you get to a point where you're as big as Josh is, where you can have your own infrastructure and you're not doing the work, and you can bring people in to do it for you for what you'd be paying an outside management company to manage your managers, that's a different story. But I would not be dealing with toilets on your own while you're trying to find deals. That's my caveat. And my early podcast episodes, I told everybody I'm a big proponent for self-management, which I am when it's the right time and not when you're in acquisition mode. So that's my 2 cents on that. So let's talk about some war stories, Josh. You just told me you just had your first fire. Share your experience of that, because I've had a dozen of them, and I want you. We talked before you recorded, and I want you to share the insights that you gained from having that happen, because everybody's going to have that happen if they get into this business at some point or another.
Exactly. So I had to be, of course, on vacation in California when this happens. Good thing I do have a great team here on the ground, and they handled everything amazingly. But got a phone call there was my director of ops put it, we've got a small issue at one of the buildings.
I love it. That's the kind of employee you want. Somebody that minimizes, helps manage your stress level. I love that.
I said, if it's a small issue, why are you calling me? But then he sent the news article of the helicopter filming the fire.
Oh, good God.
So we worked into it. And essentially what had happened is a building that we had only owned for about 3 months. It was actually one of our newest acquisitions. Had a fire that had started on a balcony.
Somebody's grill or something?
You know what? It looked like it was a space heater. I still haven't even got the official report, but the irony in it is that had it started in a unit, fire suppression at this building would have put it out. So the fire marshal says, but on a balcony, they don't have fire suppression. Hence a fire that burns 12 units. So
12 units got damaged. Holy cow, that's a big...
What's amazing was really the fire only damaged 2 or 3 units, but the water and the smoke, mostly the water, really took everything else out. It's going to be a down to studs gut remodel, and we're just working through that process. But I didn't have any education in this. I've never had this happen. And thankfully, I put a couple of calls in after my initial insurance call. And a call to my lender, because when you get into this agency financing, they want to know everything. They have a department that handles this. So put a call in to a broker who is a good friend, referred me to a couple of owners that he was familiar, had recent experience. And the big takeaway from this that I'm really, really glad I connected with was to get an independent, we call them independent adjuster.
Right. They can be called independent adjusters or public adjusters.
Okay.
I'm really glad that you got that advice, because what they'll do is they'll go, well, go ahead, please. You finish telling the story.
So I may not have gone that way. In fact, I probably wouldn't have. The first thing I wanted to make sure of was that no one got hurt. Luckily, no one did in this fire. But then it very quickly becomes a money and an insurance issue. And if you don't have somebody on your side here, which is what the independent adjuster does for you, it can make things very difficult. And ultimately, you can end up getting a lot less out of the claim. So not only that, but this adjuster was able to provide advice and experience from literally day one. I talked to him when the fire marshal was still out there and the fire department still had trucks on scene. I already had this guy on the phone, and he advised me as far as putting tenants up in hotels and as far as the Red Cross and you name it, every little thing, through getting tenants access to units with liability waivers and then possession release waivers after the fact. And it was just very, very nice to have almost somebody on my team that had experience that I didn't have. So if that ever happens, if you're listening to this, you have something like this come up or any catastrophic event, I would highly recommend seeking out some type of independent adjuster.
Yep. I'll add a caveat. Talk to other investors or property owners in the area and get referrals, because some are great and some are terrible. But the great ones will make your life much, much easier. Now, they typically charge a small percentage of the total claim, or they'll do it on some other financial arrangement, but it's worth every penny. And typically they'll get you enough to pay for themselves. So because they'll go in and with a microscope clearly delineate every piece of potentially damaged property in your property and make sure that nothing gets missed, where of course the insurance company is trying to save as much money as they can on the claim. So, when I had Hurricane Charlie hit here in Florida, I had 360 damaged houses and apartments. And we ended up having to go to court. But if I hadn't had a public adjuster or a independent adjuster, it would have been a complete catastrophe. So that's a great tip. So any other landlord-tenant war stories you want to share, or any lessons that you learned from that business? I did a whole Facebook Live episode on some of my funniest and saddest and craziest landlord-tenant stories. I'd love to hear if you've got any.
That's the most recent and vivid one for us because we're living it right here, right now. But we've had every landlord war story. Well, we've had a lot of them. We've had slip and falls. We've had, claims of bed bugs. We've had plenty of screening tweaks, let's say, that we've made to our processes over the years, so that I feel we're doing a much better job of screening now.
You have to be very, very careful with the screening, guys. Make sure you know the what's discrimination and what's not, and how you can turn down a resident versus how you can't. And you will be surprised. In fact, I should do a whole clip on that alone, because there are some, there are professionals out there that are trying to trip up landlords to see if they'll mess up in their selection process, and they file suit, and it's a cottage business. So you really need to know what the laws are as far as discrimination.
We've actually had a fair housing inquiry. We came out on the right side of that, thankfully. But that's really scary stuff there.
There is, boy. They can really hurt you. And the key is not just in knowing it yourself, but making sure you've documented training your employees in it, especially if you're in a situation like you are, Josh, where you own a business. I've got a good buddy in a mastermind that I'm in that for other real estate asset classes, and he owns a office warehouse, and he had a warehouse with an office, and a guy came in and said, "Can I use the restroom?" He said, "Well, we don't have a public restroom," but the guy said, "Please, I really need to go." And the guy, no good deed goes unpunished. The guy went in there and took pictures because there weren't any handicap rails. It wasn't handicapped accessible. And then, I don't remember what it ended up being, $20,000 or $30,000, claim. It's just crazy that there's people like that out there, but there are. And as it relates to, screening for units as well. There are, besides just race, there are a lot of other things that you cannot discriminate against. So just get up to speed on that, guys. And I promise I'll do a clip on that on Facebook Live before too long. Let's see, property management. Let me just think if I got anything else to ask there. So, if you were coaching somebody about this business, what would you tell them to learn the first 90 days? Is there anything in particular, or would you just say, just get out there and study?
I think it's too broad to just say get out there and study. I think you really need to identify your target. Let's say that's going to be multifamily, and you make that determination. I think you need to learn terminology and analysis right out of the gate. Good. Because if you're going to grow that portfolio, you're going to be talking to brokers. That broker is going to know from the first 5 minutes, the first probably minute you talk to him, if you don't know what a cap rate is and you don't know expense ratios and rough ballparks of what expenses should be, things like that, it's going to show, and you're probably going to have a really hard time getting deals. You really need to do a bunch of analysis and really get the terminology down.
Yeah, I tell people, especially when you're talking to brokers, when they send you a deal, when you respond, you need to give them a carefully articulated response. After I normalize the expenses, my cash on cash ended up to be X, and I really need Y. So, and here's why. And so, I'm sure that, I probably can't buy it for what I need to buy it to get to the numbers that I need. But, that kind of a credible response, so they feel like you know what you're talking about, and it separates you. Let me ask you this, Josh. What do you think is the most common reason people fail in this business?
If I had to guess, I would say that a huge percentage of people never actually get off the ground in the first place. So that's probably different than getting in and failing. I don't know that I can think of many, if anyone, that's gotten in and gotten that past that first property hurdle that hasn't kept going with it.
The first property is absolutely, it's so funny. I'm actually doing a driving force clip right now. I do these driving force clips about success and the psychology of success. And the one I'm doing today is about taking the first step, i.e. or buying the first property. Once you get past that first property, it's like dominoes. The first one's the hardest, but once you realize you can do it, the chains come off, the fear goes away, and then they just stack up like dominoes. And so that's a great point. Do you, what do you think is a characteristic that people in this business need to have to be successful?
So you obviously, like we talked about earlier, are going to need to be the type of person that can dedicate yourself to the education aspect of it. But I really don't believe that characteristic is what does it. If I look back on the people that I see do this, don't take it the wrong way, but it's a willingness or an appetite for risk. I say that with calculated risk, but you really got to have the balls to go for it. And I see a lot of people that just analyze and analyze and analyze. And I did it too when I first started out.
Sure.
But if you don't actually move forward with something, if you do the same thing as everyone else, you're going to get the same results. So you're going to have to, at some point, just take that little bit of leap, a little bit of blind faith.
You have to take action. You have to push through the fear. You have to push through the limiting beliefs, and the action will mitigate the fear. Take the first step. The next step will be revealed. And like Martin Luther King said, in fact, I just found that quote. Hang on one second. And Lao Tzu said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, but you've got to take that first step. And, you don't have to see the Martin Luther King's quote is, you don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step in faith. Sometimes you have to have faith. As simple as that. And there's so many people get caught in analysis paralysis. And, yes, learn this business, study this business, evaluate deals. Repetition is the mother of skill. Evaluate tons of deals, but at some point, pull the trigger. Okay. If a deal checks off all the boxes, pull the trigger, period. So are there any books that you gift out to people that are interested in this business that have impacted you?
Yeah, definitely. I go all the way back. I do like a lot of the Grant Cardone stuff, as I just showed you. I'm reading I'm not done here, but I'm reading the Be Obsessed or Be Average now. I've obviously read 10X, which I thought was great. Since I run the management company, and I've been really big on building systems lately, I've been a lot more in. I'm sorry, what's that?
I was just saying, were you going to say E-Myth?
I've read. Oh yeah, E-Myth is a great
Right.
one. I mean, I'm sure Rich Dad Poor Dad is.
Oh,
is
of course.
listed by
Yeah,
everyone. That's a
I
great
hear that
one.
every time. Yeah, that's like the Bible for this business. By
But
the
to
way, guys,
expand-
E-Myth by Michael Gerber is all about systemizing a business like a McDonald's, for example. It's a great book to help you realize that really that every business is just systems and people. But please, what were you going to say?
To expand on that E-Myth, that's where I get a lot of interest. I have a lot of interest in the growing of a business, whether that be that I run a management company or just you're going to at some point have people working for you in this business. And
Sure.
that's something I had no formal training whatsoever in or no skill in. So it's all being learned from scratch. So I've gone to a lot of the Traction, Rocket Fuel. Traction's by Gino Wickman. Rocket Fuel is a follow-up by him. It's more about building businesses and building systems.
Executing.
Exactly. There's a book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. I just got through, and all these types of business books are really where I find that I have more interest in lately. And it's more about operating something that you're not the cog in the wheel. You're not the bottleneck. And that's something
most
I really
most of the time, most of the time, the leader is the bottleneck.
Absolutely.
In most businesses, the leader is the bottleneck. Good for you.
If you don't know who your bottleneck is, it's you.
It usually is. Yeah, that's very insightful, buddy. I'm really impressed. So, what do you think's the biggest quality a leader should have, if you were to pick one?
You know, for me, it's been my personal challenge has been being able to let go. I think what I see, in fact, in our business daily, when I talk to my leadership team, we will pick out businesses that we work with that I say mail them a copy of the E-Myth, because you see so many business operate where the leader hasn't given away the authority to his team. And I look at it as you've paid high quality people good amounts of money to be here. Let them make some decisions. And so it took me a long time to get there.
Yeah, it's hard when you're a control freak like you and I.
Yep.
It's difficult to let it go. You know, you think nobody can do it as well as you can. But you know what's the reality is? Many times they can do it better. And
Yep.
and it took me decades to be okay with that. But that's the reality. And anytime I've got a big decision, I bring the whole team in and we come up with great ideas. You know, that collective consciousness, the whole mastermind concept is very, very powerful, particularly in your own organization. Well, listen, brother, you've added a ton of value today, man. I really appreciate you being on the show, and I'm excited to see where you take this thing. I've got socks older than you, and look at you already where you are, $15 million portfolio. Anyway, keep rocking, buddy. Thanks for being on the show.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Guys, if you want to reach Josh, you can reach him at epicpropertymanagement.com.
Thank you for listening to the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments. For more resources or to connect with us further, please visit our website at rodcleef.com. Tune in next week for our next show.
Any investment opportunities mentioned on this podcast are limited to accredited investors. Any investments will only be made with proper disclosure and subscription documentation and subject to all applicable laws.